How's it going, everybody? Thank you very much for watching. I always appreciate it. I'm Orlando Ruiz Jr. A few weeks ago, last month, around the 18th of February 2025, due to a very tragic and sad set of circumstances, the world lost one of our greatest actors, a real Hollywood icon, a real legend, Gene Hackman. This is a guy that retired gracefully in the early 2000s after a really long and illustrious career in film. Then when you find out that that person has actually passed away into the next life, one comes to realize, even though you never knew the person, personally, you realize what that person meant to you and your childhood. Because that's the case with Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman is an actor that I grew up watching my entire life, and one of the first movies I ever saw ever was Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, because back in 1987, 88, that was the beginning of my movie watching life. He was an actor's actor. He was a great entertainer. He was the everyman. He could do action. You bought him as a tough guy. In a drama, he always knocked it out of the park. In comedies, he even excelled at making us laugh because he was that good of an actor. He could just pull off any genre seamlessly. He was that great of an actor. And this is my tribute to Gene Hackman. In the number 10 spot on my list, I have Hoosiers from 1986, a basketball drama period film. Takes place in the 40s, 50s, from director David Anspaugh, where you have an Academy Award nominated performance from Mr. Hackman in the role of Norman Dale, a basketball coach that is all about the fundamentals, all about his love of the game, and no nonsense kind of coach. The team, it's a real kind of rough at first because they really love their first coach. He passes away, and then Gene Hackman has to go in, get them all straightened out, and has to go over all the fundamentals over and over again until they're sick of it. But they're all the better for it. And you got really good supporting performances here from Barbara Hershey, a great supporting performance from Dennis Hopper, and it's just a feel-good basketball story about this high school team that their coach takes them all the way to the championship game. It's full of cliches and stuff, but it's still very, very enjoyable and a lot of fun. He's always backing up his team. He's always calling out the refs whenever they call out bullshit calls against his team. And he keeps doing that even though he gets them in hot water every now and then. But yeah, it's a very, very good movie. If you're someone that enjoys a good drama and a good sports movie and you want to check out Gene Hackman in one of his finest performances, then I do recommend that you check out Hoosiers. It will get a full review from me someday, but for right now, it makes the list at number 10. On the list at number 9 is The Royal Tenenbaums from Wes Anderson, 2001. This movie is hilarious. This is the kind of movie that isn't for everybody because not everybody's into Wes Anderson's style. It's a very quirky, very kind of signature style that not everybody I think appreciates, but I do like the humor in this movie. I love the performances and I really like the story. But overall, what really takes the cake for me is Gene Hackman's performance as Royal Tenenbaum, the head of the family who is kicked out of his own family because he was just too much of an asshole of a father. But he comes back trying to make up for it, and he has this little plan to tell his family that he's dying, even though he's not really dying. And so this is another one that I'm definitely going to go into in terms of its own review. The dialogue in the film is hilarious. The kid actors are great. I enjoy the scenes where his children are little and he goes to see their play that they put on and he complains because his daughter asks him, "What did you think of the play?" And he says something like, "I just didn't find it believable. It's a bunch of kids in costumes, and you could tell that it really kind of breaks your heart." Back in the day when this came out and award season came rolling around, it was cool to see Gene Hackman get a win for Best Actor at the Golden Globes in a musical or comedy. But I really thought that he deserved the Oscar nomination. I didn't expect that he would win because that was the year that Denzel came out in Training Day, and he deservedly enjoyed his Oscar that year. But it would have just been cool to see Gene Hackman there with the nominees because I thought this was an Oscar caliber comedic performance from him. He's just so great at playing a lovable asshole, and not a lot of people can do that like Gene Hackman. So yeah, but Royal Tenenbaums, that is my number 9. In the number 8 spot on my list is The Birdcage from 1996 from director Mike Nichols. One of my favorite comedies from the 1990s. A film that stars Robin Williams, Gene Hackman, Nathan Lane, Diane Wiest. This is a very funny film with a hilarious premise. I believe it's based on a French play. You have outstanding comedic performances, not just from Nathan Lane and Robin Williams and Gene Hackman, but also from Hank Azaria, who is quite noteworthy in this movie. Robin Williams' character is the owner of a drag club, and his wife is the star. He's a drag queen, played by Nathan Lane, and their son is a kid that wants to get married now that he's about 20 years old. The girl that he wants to marry happens to be the daughter of a very conservative senator, played by Gene Hackman, and they're coming over to meet the parents. They're coming over to meet Robin Williams and Nathan Lane, but the son sold them as a straight couple, and so now they got to put on an act. In the film, Gene Hackman's character, Senator Kevin Keeley, a very conservative politician, gets himself involved in a sex scandal, and his daughter, played by Calista Flockhart, says that I want to marry this guy who is the son of a Greek diplomat, a cultural attaché, whatever that is. And so his wife, played by Diane Wiest, wants to spin the whole thing into something positive, and in order to smooth things out, put some focus on their kid's wedding. Gene Hackman was great in any genre, but when you watch him in a comedy, in a movie like this, you get a real sense of fun from this actor. You see that twinkle in his eye when he smiles at times, and I just love seeing my favorite actors have a ball on screen. In the number 7 spot on my list is Night Moves from director Arthur Penn, a film from 1975, a very underrated movie where you have Gene Hackman as an LA detective, Harry Mosby. He has a troubled marriage. He is an ex-football player. He used to play for the Oakland Raiders, and he's on the case of a missing girl. You have a young James Woods in here. You have a young Melanie Griffith. And, there are some risque scenes in there, quite a bit of nudity there. In the film, things start out pretty simple at first. At first, it's just a missing persons case. But after he finds her and brings her back, things get a little bit more complicated. And before you know it, murder enters the picture. And then things get really interesting. And I don't want to give away what happens because, like a lot of movies, I want to go into this in depth in their own reviews and their own videos. It has that raw, gritty 70s feel. It has a great pace to it. I really enjoy the score in this movie. Some pretty cool underwater scenes and a lot of mystery there. And if that kind of thing sounds like it's up your alley, then definitely give Night Moves a shot. Gene Hackman is excellent in it. And yeah, from 1975, good little detective movie that should be appreciated a lot more, I think. That's my number 7. Number 6 on the list, we got The French Connection from 1971 from director William Friedkin, where you have an Academy Award winning performance from the great Mr. Hackman as Jimmy Popeye Doyle, a cop in New York City on the trail of some really bad French dudes. You also have Roy Scheider in there, and you got one of the classic car chases of the 1970s. And it's just a really cool little cop story. It's a real grimy and raw street level kind of cop story with Gene Hackman in full tough guy mode in an electrifying performance, playing a character that's definitely walking that gray area. He's not your typical knight in shining armor kind of a cop. He is a racist, he's a bigot, but he's a real person, and you kind of buy that this person would be around at this time in the early 70s doing what he does, even though, people aren't perfect, they got a job to do, and that's Popeye Doyle. And it's a movie that definitely transcends the cop genre. It has a lot of the classic cop tropes that would go on to be, cliched by the time you get to the 80s. But The French Connection did a lot of things first. In the number 5 spot on my list, I have Get Shorty, one of my all-time favorite comedies, one of my favorite 90s movies, based on a book from Elmore Leonard, directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, who would go on to direct Men in Black. This is a gem of a comedy starring John Travolta, Gene Hackman, Danny DeVito, Rene Russo, where you got John Travolta as Chili Palmer, you have Gene Hackman as Harry Zim, a Hollywood producer, and this movie really does a great job at satirizing Hollywood. In this film, Travolta plays a gangster and a loan shark from Florida that goes to Los Angeles to look for somebody that skipped town on a debt, and in the meantime, he decides he's going to check out the whole Hollywood scene. There are some great moments in this film between Gene Hackman's character and Travolta's character, or Gene Hackman's character and Delroy Lindo's character, or Gene Hackman and Dennis Farina. That is a standout scene. And Dennis Farina kind of steals the show every now and then. But for me, this movie really belongs to Gene Hackman. I love the character of Harry Zim. There's a great scene in the movie where Hackman's character, Harry Zim, is trying to act tough because he has this impression of how you got to act if you're a tough guy from John Travolta's character. And so he goes to talk to another mobster, and it doesn't work out too well for him. Look at me, Harry. Look at me. Great fucking scene. In the number 4 spot on this list, we have The Poseidon Adventure from 1972. One of my all-time favorite disaster movies where you have Gene Hackman trying to save people on this ship that's turned over and they're fighting for survival. He plays Reverend Scott. Irwin Allen, the producer of this, made some great disaster movies back in the day. Movies like this and The Towering Inferno, another great one. I have reviewed both of those movies on my channel if you want to check those out. And yeah, this is a movie that if you haven't seen, maybe you've seen the remake from 2005 with Kurt Russell, but the original is really where it's at. Even though the effects aren't, as great as the 2005 remake, it's all about the characters. A very thrilling movie from beginning to end, at least for me, even on rewatches. I love watching Hackman be this take charge kind of guy in another kind of tough guy role, but he's more of a sensitive kind of tough guy. But there are some real close calls and really hairy moments, and you got Ernest Borgnine there, Shelley Winters also, Jack Albertson. I love a good disaster movie, I love a good drama, and I love a good action movie, and this movie is all those things. This won the Academy Award for Best Special Effects at the time, and we all know that the effects in this movie aren't going to hold up to a lot of the CG and stuff nowadays, but sometimes model effects and miniatures and matte paintings, stuff like that, optical effects, sometimes it can look better in certain cases. I'm not saying that that's the case here, but when you compare it to some things, sometimes it looks a little bit more realistic, and so that's just how I feel about 70s movies in general. But yeah, 1972's The Poseidon Adventure, it is a gem of the 70s that I do recommend if you haven't seen. Number 3 on this list, we got Crimson Tide from 1995 from director Tony Scott. This is a movie that stars Denzel Washington, Gene Hackman. This is a hell of a thriller. Gene Hackman plays the tough, no-nonsense captain of the ship, Captain Frank Ramsey. Denzel Washington plays Ron Hunter. He is the XO, and he's chosen by Hackman early in the film because he needs somebody to replace the XO that he had before because I guess he had some kind of appendicitis or something. You also see Viggo Mortensen in there. You'll also see James Gandolfini in there. James Gandolfini is actually also in Get Shorty, now that I think about it, which came out the same year as this, now that I think about it. But yeah, this movie is so great at just building tension and then holding it for pretty much 2 hours. It's like a 2-hour exercise in tension and suspense. On top of that, you have 2 powerhouse performances from Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington as these 2 guys that are button heads that don't agree with each other. You can tell they have respect for each other, but when it comes to the shit hitting the fan, one guy has to have it his way and the other guy has to make sure that, things are cool. And so you have these different methods of doing things, and, these guys are just going to clash. With top-notch excitement, excellent direction, and great performances, Crimson Tide is a great film. If you haven't seen, I do recommend that you check it out. This is a movie that I will be reviewing in its own video later on this year. But yeah, if you haven't seen it, don't sleep on this one. This is a must-watch. Hell of a film. Check it out for yourself. In the number 2 spot on my list is Superman from 1978, otherwise known very affectionately by some as Superman the movie. I prefer just to call it Superman, even though we have a movie coming out later this year that has the same title, but it's okay. You can have more than just one, right? Because this one is the OG. It's the one that started it all. It started the comic book genre film that we all know nowadays that has blown up into something huge and maybe a little bit, too much by now. But back in the day, this was it. For me, this is one of the most rewatchable movies. I watch this movie maybe like 3 times a year because it makes me feel so damn good. It makes me feel like a kid again every time I rewatch it. And Gene Hackman really gives the character of Lex Luthor a real sense of cool. The way Gene Hackman portrays the character of Lex Luthor, you really bought that this guy was that smart, that intelligent, this super evil criminal genius that could actually maybe defeat the Man of Steel with mind over muscle. Because Lex Luthor is a bit on the older side, so you don't really see this guy putting on that mech suit to kick Superman's ass, but he does use his intelligence, his wit, and his overall knowledge of books to, try and defeat the Man of Steel gets pretty damn close. Spoilers. And at the end of the movie, that great reveal where he, takes off the old toupee. And, this is one of those things that if you were a 70s kid or 80s kid, I'm sure it must have been all the more magical. But, I'm a kid of the 80s and 90s, and so unfortunately, my introduction to Superman was Superman 4, as I mentioned before. But after watching Superman 4, I had to go back and check out the earlier films, and there is nothing like the original. The original is one of the greatest movies of all time. It is a classic. Again, landmark 70s film, and so if you haven't seen this movie, this is a staple of comic book films, comic book cinema in general. But there can only be one number one on the list, and for me, my number one is going to be Unforgiven from 1992. One hell of a Western, one hell of a great film. Won the Academy Award for Best Picture, deservedly so, from Clint Eastwood, who also directed and starred as William Money. And you have Little Bill, played by Gene Hackman. Little Bill is the villain of the film. Gene Hackman also earned himself an Academy Award for his role in the film. Morgan Freeman is great in it. You also have Richard Harris, who's great in it. Unforgiven is a revisionist Western with a very introspective look at the genre as a whole. And you can tell watching the film what an affinity Clint Eastwood has for the Western genre in the way that he shows certain things in terms of the lighting and the way he films landscapes and the way he films his actors. You don't get a sense that Hackman's character Little Bill is an evil guy, but you do get a sense that he is a bad motherfucker and that he will mess you up if you come into his town wearing a gun. He has a no gun rule about his town, and so you come in his town with a gun, you better be ready because he will kick the shit out of you. And yeah, Gene Hackman is great in the movie. He really kind of helps to really make it more than what it could have been. Had it been a different actor, who knows what it could have turned into, Could have just been another generic Western with some guy telling Eastwood, I'll kill you. But nah, Gene Hackman, no. He actually gives Eastwood a run for his money. With Richard Harris's character, English Bob, and Little Bill, played by Gene Hackman, you get a sense in their scenes together that there's some history there, there's some bad blood, and Gene Hackman is not to be fooled with in this movie as Little Bill. And yeah, English Bob finds out real fast, and winning Hackman his second Oscar for a performance in acting. This is a movie that should not be slept on. If you're a movie fan, if you're a fan of Westerns, watch Unforgiven. Don't wait. It is an experience that you won't regret and you won't forget. Unforgiven from 1992. A hell of a film and a great time. Check it out. And there you have it. That is my list. All right, for those of you that are just impatient and you always like to skip it to the end of a video, here is the recap. At number 10, Hoosiers. There it is. At number 9, The Royal Tenenbaums. Right there. Criterion Collection. At number 8, The Birdcage. At number 7, Night Moves. A lot of these are going to get their own reviews eventually. Number 6, The French Connection. Reviewed that one. Has its own already. Number 5, Get Shorty. Love it. Number 4, The Poseidon Adventure. Love that one. Number 3, Crimson Tide. Love it, love it, love it. Number 2, Superman, the movie. Love it, love it, love it, love it. And number 1, Unforgiven. Love you to death, baby. Maybe there are some Gene Hackman movies that didn't make my list, but maybe they're going to be on your list. Movies like Mississippi Burning, or The Package, or The Conversation, or Uncommon Valor, or Class Action. Mr. Hackman, you will be missed. We love you, and we'll see you one day. Take care, buddy. Bye-bye.